Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm Michael, and today we're going to hear some stories from Doug Boze. Now, Doug literally wrote the book on bear hunting, and I mean literally. I've actually put a link to it in the show notes, but the book is called The Ultimate Guide to Black Bear Hunting, so please check it out. Now, of course, being in the middle of spring bear season here in the West, I appreciate Doug taking some time to actually sit down with us and tell some of his best stories. So that being said, let's kick it off and let Doug tell you about some of his close calls. Well, Doug, thank you very much for joining us today on Hunting Stories Podcast. I figured we'd kick this thing off by letting you introduce yourself.
Yeah, man, thanks for having me. My name is Douglas Boze, as some of you may know. I am the author of The Ultimate Guide to Black Bear Hunting and No Bait Just Bears, and the creator of Ultimate Predator Calls app for Android and iOS. Just a regular family guy from Washington State. I'm 46 years old. I've been hunting since I was 12, and I hunt just about everything that walks. Not much of a bird hunter, but I like hunting grouse when the occasion rises, but usually it's just big game for me and predators.
There you go.
And that's about it.
Well, I know we brought you here to tell some stories. Can you kind of set the stage for us? Let us know kind of how long ago was it, what you were using, what you were hunting, and then just dive into it and get into the gritty details. We want to hear the emotion of the story.
Sure. So this will be a little different than my other podcasts where I'm just, spouting off bear stuff all the time. I kind of put myself on autopilot, and now I got to think of some stories to tell. So, well, let's start my last bear. Last summer, I was hunting a creek bottom, kind of surrounded by brush and mature stands. There's some mature stands, some clear cuts, but it's a place I like to go. And there's actually a little pool there that I can take a dip in on hot days. It's about 4.5, 5 feet deep. And actually, my goal
is this.
This is in Washington. And my goal is to actually shoot a bear while I'm in that waiting in that pond, or in that little pool, I should say. I don't know if it kicks back to when I was a kid and I watched Rambo too many times or what, but that's kind of my goal. I want to do it while I'm standing in that water. But anyway,
for some reason, Doug, I got the idea of being bare naked and shooting a bear while you're in that pond. So
good
luck.
The idea is to be in my skivvies, or not my skivvies, but with underwear and Crocs. That's pretty much my plan. I don't think a whole lot of people have done that.
Formal hunting attire, there you
right? Go. And it's secluded, so I won't scare anybody with my dad bod while I'm in there. Anyway, I sat down and put my back up against a log, and I predator called for a while. I previously had walked the creek bed, and there was plenty of bear sign, and I have trail cameras along that creek, and I noticed that there, set after set, I would have cougar and I would have bear and very little deer, but there was like a ton of predators in this area. And the last few years I've been holding out for a specific color of bear, so I haven't killed a bear in a couple of years. But then when I saw these predators, I thought, if I see a bear, if I call one in, I'm just going to shoot it just to take a predator out, because it's so thick with them. And so I sat down, started predator calling, and started off with just a rabbit squall, and right at 45 minutes off to my right. So setting it up, I should say, I'm sitting on a bend of a creek, and so straight ahead I can see probably 120 yards, and then to my right I can see another 100 yards. So I can see pretty good down the creek, but it's thick brush all along it. So right at 45 minutes, the bear come walking out at about 40 yards, 50 yards out of this bear trail, which happened to be the same bear trail that my son shot his first bear on the year previous. The bear just kind of sauntered across the creek like he didn't have a care in the world, and climbed up on the log jam that creates the pool that I swim in. And then as he crossed the creek and got into the brush, I stood up because I thought he was going to head to the tree line, and I was going to try to get a shot at him. And I start walking towards the pool, and to my surprise, he took a turn and then climbed up the stump pile, and then looked down on me, and he was actually kind of above me. At not even
what distance?
Not even 20 yards. I mean, maybe 20 yards. He's basically across the pool and up on top of a little log jam, and I thought, man, I got to
ask one quick question, Doug. One quick question. Just because I know you're in Washington, and you're close to where there are grizzlies. This is a black bear or a grizzly bear? I just want to make sure that I'm shitting myself.
This is a black bear.
The right way.
Yeah. We
Okay,
have
perfect.
some grizzlies in Washington, but mainly it's up on our northern border or like the northeast corner, and so I'm hunting in the northwest corner in this story.
Gotcha.
And so I grabbed my phone and I when I stood up and I started walking over there, I turned the power on. I was trying to get video of it, and so I grabbed my rifle and I got my phone kind of like balanced on one hand. And I'm holding the rifle and it looks like I'm taking video and I got it all lined up and I shoot as he turned a little bit, gave me a broadside shot, and I shot right when he turned, and then he just kind of barreled off the log jam, and he didn't go anywhere. So I kind of walk over there quietly and check, and he died pretty much instantly. All he did was go off the log jam, and he died in basically a sandbox, which was a lot of fun.
Hmm.
But sadly, when I stood up, I must have like hit the stop button or something to that effect. Cause I thought I had it all on video and I didn't have any of it. I was like, oh, I just had it like right where I stood up, and then I shut it off. I was like, oh man, that sucks. But anyway, yeah, I ended up skinning out the bear in the sandbox, and took it
That
was
sounds like a
right it
mess.
was right near dusk, and by the time I got done with half of it, carried out what I could, and then my little brother Jim came with me the next day, and we got the rest of it undisturbed and got it all out, and now it's summer sausage in my freezer, and I just shared some of that with
Delicious.
a buddy of mine today, in fact. And yeah, the hide's getting tanned, so that's one story.
That's awesome. Was that a spring
It
bear
was a
or a
fall
fall
bear.
bear?
It was a boar. He was about 100 and I'd say about 180 pounds. He wasn't huge. He was like an average sized bear. I think he was 5 years old from the tooth. And it would probably be a bear I would pass on normally, but again, it was like, there were so many predators in that area. I just thought this place needs help.
Hmm.
And I left my trail cams up for another month after that, and bear were still going in and out of that whole area. So I know, I mean, I know there's plenty of bear in there still. So I didn't hurt the bear
Yeah,
population.
absolutely. That's awesome, man. That's a good story. Is that the closest you've ever been to a bear? Or I'm sure in your years of bear hunting, you've probably gotten a little closer
Closest
before
I've
now.
ever been to a bear is 3 steps. So that's another story. Actually, in the same area, not too far from where I shot that one, I was walking along a logging road, and I like the predator call, as many of you know, and so I climbed up on this stump pile, and this is a cut that's probably like 5 or 6 years old at the time, pretty brushy, but still kind of shootable, still huntable. And so I'm predator calling. I can kind of hear something coming in, but then there's a tree line about 200 yards out, and it just sounds like the bear is like ripping into a stump or something. And he's not paying any attention to me, but I can hear him just like crashing around, tearing into a stump, like growling and snorting. And thinking, man, and I call and call and call, no luck. And by now it's getting to where I need to start hiking out. Otherwise, I'll be hiking out in the dark. And I think, well, if I see that bear out of sheer spite, I just wanted to shoot it because it didn't come in. I was like angry at it that it didn't come in. I'm like, all right, whatever. So then I get down and I get to the road and I start hiking out, and I had a coyote that was coming in to the call, but when he saw me hit the skid road, he backed out and ran off, and I wasn't going to shoot. I was like, heck with it, because my 300
No.
Winchester short magnum would, the exit wound blows out half the coyote. So I was like, I'm not going to waste the bullet. And
Yeah.
so I when I passed on that coyote, I noticed that I could hear the bear kind of paralleling the road with me, and it sounded like he was getting closer and closer. And the road, like 100 yards up, kind of comes to a T, and I thought, well, if he's paralleling the road, he's going to cross that road at that T, so I'm just going to try to hit him at that T when he pops out. And when I thought that, I kept going with the road a little bit, or going with the bear, and then I was right along the right-hand edge, and it got closer and closer, and I thought, man, this thing sounds like he's going to step on me. And so I stopped, and I backed up 3 steps, 1, 2, 3. And when I backed up about, I don't know, 5 seconds later, maybe, he come crawling out right where I was standing. And he was a bigger bear, and he kind of looked at me, and I looked at him, and all I had was like, I had my rifle up, and I have a scope on there. And it was like kind of just an oh shit moment for him and I. I mean, we both kind of looked at each other like, something's going to happen here. And he kind of turned, and I shot one off, and I hit him, and he like ran off. And so then I'm searching, and all I found was just a little teeny chunk of meat, of like fat on this bush. And I looked for quite some time, and then I came back the next day. But I honestly think I either grazed him or like I shot him in the butt or something. But he ran through that brush,
Mm.
and I never heard him stop. Like, when I hit him, I lost the sound from him running. I didn't get a death
Yeah.
ball. I didn't get like a pile up. Anyway, I looked and looked, nothing happened. I think I just grazed him, but that was like, in retrospect, that was probably a situation I shouldn't have shot, but I was so surprised and like kind of, it's like a split second decision where the bear's
Yeah.
that close. And I write about that in the book too.
Yeah. I have a bear 3 yards.
Yeah.
I'm shooting
Yes,
no matter
yes.
what.
Yeah. It was like a yard. I mean, it was close.
Yeah.
And then a couple years ago, I was talking about close encounters with bears. I was deer hunting in this place I call Camp Teabag, and because I used to bring these Folger coffee bags that looked like tea bags, and I would use those as my coffee.
Okay.
And then when I would camp, I would hang them up in the tree to dry them out to reuse them because I would only bring like a couple. So I called it Camp
Yeah.
Teabag, and so despite what other people may think, and I was out there by myself, and this is like a couple miles, if like 3-4 miles in, and it is where a couple of rivers meet or creeks meet, and there's a big patch of there's a field there, but it's surrounded by like deadfalls and a burned out valley, and so my tent is in about the only safe spot to put it. Because of the deadfalls and stuff, trees are crashing all the time from the wind and everything else.
Yeah.
So right at dusk, I go back to camp, and I have my rifle set down on its bipod, and I'm getting ready to eat, and I can kind of see like what I think is I think I'm seeing spots because out before me, right at dusk when things get low light, you can't really see all that great, and the field just looks kind of white from all the dead grass, and it looks like there's a black spot kind of floating in there, and I think, man, my eyes playing tricks on me? What is that? And then it stops and then starts floating some more. And I'm thinking, all right, that thing stopped and started moving. So I just kind of slowly pick up my rifle just to be safe. And a bear walked right up to me, like maybe 10 feet away. And the funny thing is that the wind
Jeez.
was blowing right to that thing. Like he had to have smelled me. But he just walked right up to me. And now it's like, it's too dark it's past shooting light for sure. And I'd kind of said something to it and it didn't move. So I touched one off in the dirt between him and me, and the thing ran off. But then I'm like, great, now I gotta, that's the last thing you kind of want to see right before you tuck yourself into bed by yourself in the backcountry. I was like, great. But
Yeah.
that was another thing. And, the bear was fine. I just shot in the dirt between us and it just scared him off. But yeah, that was another example, I guess.
That's funny. I'll tell a story because I have a close encounter with a bear story. I was elk hunting in Colorado and we weren't having too much luck, so we spent this morning glassing, just looking at these hillsides, hoping that an elk would pop its head up. We noticed down the ridge, and this is a ridge. It's maybe about a mile and a half in front of us, 1,000 foot down, 1,000 foot up, a mile and a half away. We see this black spot moving. And it looks to us to be a pretty big bear. And we're familiar enough with this country that we're like, if we book it, we think we can get to this area kind of down the ridge line where you drop into this little bowl and then you'd follow this game trail that we knew we had cameras on. We saw bears on it. We're like, I bet if we can get there, we can beat him to it. We can set up and he'll walk right to us. So we run down the hill, run up the other side. I say hill, it's a mountain. And we get into place, breathing hard. I drop into this little gulch, which is right off of the trail where I think that the bear is going to be coming in. And my buddy's on the opposite side. There's this sort of a dip. It's like a finger ridge coming down. He's on the opposite side of that finger ridge. And he's like, I'll stand here. You stand over there. Hopefully we can get this thing. We're elk hunting, but we have tags for bears. So we figured we'd give it a go. When I get into this little gulch, I realize that bear's maybe 10 yards away from me through a bunch of brush. I can hear him, can't see him, but he is close. And I've never been more upset to only have my bow on me in my life. Like I wasn't prepared to walk into him in basically a ditch with just a pointy stick. Fortunately for me, he smelled me, heard me, I don't know, but he booked it. And I was a little like, okay, I'm going to pretend like I'm upset that he got away, but I'm actually happy that he ran the other direction. So I kind of crawl out of my little ditch, look over to my buddy on the other side of the ridge, and I'm not joking, maybe 30 feet above him, but about 10 to 15 yards back, so he can't see, is a giant bull elk. And so I'm about 100 yards, and I'm like trying to signal to him that there's a bull right above him. Get your bow out. And he's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm trying not to give away to the elk, but I'm trying to. Either way, we never saw that elk again. My buddy didn't understand. I need to work on my sign language, or we need to work on our signals. But it was always, I will always remember that story, because just being terrified of the bear and then walking up, and then there's the elk we've been looking for the last couple of days. So that's just ridiculous. That's how it goes. Cool.
I was gonna just chime in with a elk hunting kind of story. So where I go elk hunting, I exclusively hunt elk with a bow. And so I was hunting by myself, but with family, and I drove down to this one spot I like to go to, and this was years even before I wrote Ultimate Guide. But anyway, I park at this little parking spot, and there's a dead end logging road that is decommissioned, so you can walk quite a ways. But when I get out and I start walking toward the road, this cougar jumps out at a tree. So the cougar actually watched me park and get out, and I was maybe 20 yards from him when he jumped out of the tree and then ran off, and I didn't have a shot. But I thought, man, what was this cougar doing here? And so I started searching around, and I found a calf elk that had been freshly killed, and it half buried under a tree. And so I thought, well, this is pretty sweet. So I hunt the morning, go back to camp for lunch and stuff, and I'm talking to the family and friends, and I was like, all right, Johnny, my little brother, I was like, all right, Johnny, we can go back there tonight. I'm sure that cougar's close by, and we can try to get this cougar. And when I elk hunt, I often bring a rifle with me in case I want to switch to like bear hunting, because elk hunting is weapon specific, but bear hunting in my state isn't. You can hunt with whatever weapon you have. And so sometimes I'll grab, if I get bored, I'll go bear hunting with a rifle or something like that. So I gave Johnny my 30-30 that he had never shot, but I had shot. And then I took I think I had my 300 with me. Yeah, I had my 300 Winchester short magnum. So we go back to the kill, and this is like an hour before dark, or an hour and a half. And I'm like, all right, Johnny, here's the kill. All you got to do is stay awake and, watch this thing. And hopefully he comes in. And then I put him like 40 yards from the kill, up against a tree. And then I went up the trail like another 100 yards, thinking that maybe the cougar will come down this trail, so one of us will get a shot. So dusk comes, right near dusk, and I'm like, well, I haven't heard nothing. I might as well get up and go see Johnny. So as soon as I stand up, I hear this shot. Pow! And I run back there. I go, Johnny, did you get it? And he goes, well, I don't know. I go, well, what happened? He says, well, I was laying here and I fell asleep, and which is typical of my brothers. And then the ants started biting him and waking him up. And when he woke up, he looked over at that elk, and there was that cougar looking at Johnny eating the elk at 40 yards from him. So the cougar's just staring at Johnny as he's sleeping, and he's eating that elk. And Johnny had never shot that gun.
God, that's terrifying.
Johnny never shot that gun, and so the gun, it could easily have been the gun's fault. Its front sight is just like a little bit bent. I mean, not a ton, but just a little bit. So it could have been enough for him to miss. Anyway, we think he missed, and so we're looking around this dead elk, trying to find blood, right? And now it's getting kind of dark, but we know that cougar is still kind of close by, and so we're looking around, and pretty soon you need a flashlight to be able to see. And so we split up, don't see nothing. We get back together, and he flashes with his light, and he says, holy shit, there's a pair of eyes. And I says, where? He says, right there. And so I look behind us, and sure enough, there's that cougar, and all you can see is his green eyes when you put the light on him. All you can see is the green eyes. And what he was doing was, and they would disappear, and that was really disconcerting, because he was close. So, when you can see the eyes, you know where it's at. But when the eyes disappear, you're thinking, where is this thing? And what he was doing was, he was behind a tree that had fell. And he would pop up and then drop down, pop up and drop down. And we could see him just enough to where, when you're watching a house cat and they do that little shimmy with their butt, and they kind of scrunch down like they're getting ready to pounce. He kept doing that. And we were yelling at him and waving arms and like, get out of here, blah, blah, blah. And he wouldn't leave. And so, yeah, and then I looked at him through my scope, and I never realized how white their faces are until I saw his face in my scope, because their chins are all white, and stuff like that. You just don't really realize it.
Yeah. What power scope and how far away do you think the cougar
It
is at
was
this point?
13 steps, and the scope I want to say is like a 3x9. I don't recall. I mean, the funny thing is I've had that scope for years, and I remember when I put it on there, but I don't remember. I think it's a
Yeah.
3x9, but it filled my it
Either
filled
way.
my
Whew.
my my lens, and so
Yeah.
it's like right at right at the end of light, and I touch one off and I completely miss, and I don't know how, but the cougar runs off. Anyway, the cougar was fine, nothing happened, but it was just like the funny thing is too is we had to hike another half mile or so to the truck, and so when we were hiking out it got pretty dark, and that was
Yeah.
nerve-wracking because we knew there was a cougar around who wasn't necessarily scared of us at all, and we were just
Yeah.
hyped up because having a cougar, and he was easily a couple minutes sitting there looking at us like that, like it wasn't a quick couple of seconds, he wasn't leaving, and that was pretty crazy. That was one of my cougar stories.
Goodness gracious. I can't even imagine that. Ugh, I've got the heebie-jeebies. All right, let's move on because I don't want to deal with any cougars. I've actually never seen a cougar in the wild. I'm sure they've seen me, but I'm fine keeping it where I'm oblivious.
They're sneaky. Let's see, what's another one? Okay, so here's another one. So with my brother Johnny, and we're back at Camp Teabag, the previous story.
Johnny's
Johnny,
asleep.
well, yeah, pretty much. So this, we were camping in there for mule deer, and this is before I kind of lightened up my pack and stuff, and before I really got kind of serious about backcountry hunting. I actually had like a Walmart tent that I would pack in there, and I had like bungee cords on my backpack, like my backpack going in was like 70-80 pounds. It was like heavy. I had actual pillows and all sorts of stuff. So I had this old Walmart tent that I had been using for years, and it had been like rainy and wet and nasty out for a good couple of days, and so one of us this evening hunt, we finally got a fire going, and we're like, all right, one of us stay in camp, keep the fire going, the other one go out and hunt. And so I keep the fire going, Johnny goes out and hunts, and I turn around and I look at the hillside, and now it's snowing, and it's snowing pretty good, and about 600-700 yards up the hill I see what I think is a fawn and a doe eating. It looks like a tree and a fawn on one side and a doe on the other. And what happened was that the buck raised its head, and what I thought was a fawn was actually its rack on the other side of the tree. So I call it the fawn buck. And it was just this huge buck. I'm like, holy crap. But it was snowing so
Wow.
bad and getting late. I was like, like maybe it'll be there tomorrow. Who knows? And Johnny comes back, and it's like a miserable night, and he's sleeping under like a super tarp situation. So I go back in my tent, and in the middle of the night, it sounds like something's scraping on my tent. And so I go, hey, bear, get out of here. Because it sounds like a bear scraping on my tent. And then the whole tent collapses and just goes like right on my head. And I'm thinking, what happened? So then I unzip my tent, and it's like a blizzard out. My tent collapsed because there's so much snow on it, and it like completely collapsed. And I look over at Johnny, and it's a blizzard outside, and he has nothing but a tarp that he's sleeping under, and all I see is his flashlight going all over the place. And I say, hey, Johnny, you doing okay? He's like, yeah, I'm all right. And so I crawl back into my tent, and I just like zip it up and go to sleep because the poles snapped and everything. So I'm kind of screwed. Anyway, next morning I get up, I'm wet, I'm kind of cold, and I go to this one spot where I've killed a couple of deer before, and I think, well, I'm just going to sit here and see what happens. And it had quit snowing, but it was still very cold out, and probably a foot of snow or something to that effect. And the wind was just howling down this valley, and I was getting pretty chilly, starting to shiver. So I thought, you know what? I have one of those little space blankets in my pack. I'm just going to take that out and wrap my legs in it and make some coffee while I sit here. So I got this tinfoil looking sheet across my legs, and as soon as I put that on, those things do work because my legs started to warm up right away. It like seals in that heat. And so I start boiling water for coffee, and of course, as I'm doing this, I make the coffee, and then I see some deer coming in. And so I go to put down my coffee cup, and the deer are getting close. They're like under 100 yards. I'd say more like 50. And there's like 2 does and a buck. And I put the coffee on the jet boil, which tips over and clangs everywhere. but they don't run off. And I'm thinking, well,
Got to pick up
yeah,
your tea bags, right?
they don't run off with all this noise, and I'm wearing like a tinfoil sheet, and I'm thinking, man, that's nuts. And this buck he comes within, I don't know, 40 yards, maybe 30 yards, and I shoot him, dump him. He just falls over in the snow, and then my brother hears a shot, and we talk on the radio, and so I ended up getting out of there that day, and I think he stayed another couple days, but that was kind of funny, only because it was a miserable night. The tent collapsed, and then as I'm sitting there with that tinfoil sheet and I'm making all this racket, I still end up lucking out and shooting a 3-point mule deer and having fun. But yeah, it was a good story.
That's awesome. I don't think I have any stories where it's quite that easy for me to harvest anything. So because it was that easy, I'm kind of glad you had a bad night the night before. But that's a good story.
Well, we had suffered. We had been out there for like 3-4 days, and it had been wet and miserable. Like, it just. But misery loves company. It's fun to suffer together like that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet that coffee when you got back to it was one of the best.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah.
If it was still warm,
I think it was. Like, I think I actually finished it before I even went and started gutting them out.
Awesome.
Yeah. So yeah. What other stories you want me to tell? You got any requests?
If I knew, I would.
If you knew, you knew. Let's let me think. This is a heartbreaker. So I'm mule deer hunting, and I spot this buck with another buck, and they're like 1,000 yards off. And I'm on this little knob, and they are kind of down this ridge and to the right and kind of in the shadows of this other rocky knob. And this one buck looks really nice. So it's like a 4-point and then a real nice buck. And I look at it and I'm thinking, well, if I use the ridge line as cover, if I go to the left of the ridge line, they're not going to see me and the wind is right. I can go all the way around and I know right where they're bedded. And they bed down on these two flat rocks, only about 10 yards apart from each other in this shaded area. It was kind of funny. So I decide to go for it. So I pack up my stuff and I get down there and I go around the ridge and the wind is right and I drop my pack and I'm getting within 200 yards, but I can get up on this little teeny knoll and, like the grassy knoll in the Kennedy assassination. I was like, this grassy knoll will allow me to get, an easy shot. So I drop my pack, keep quiet, and I scurry through. And this is in Eastern Washington and it's dry and kind of crunchy out and stuff, but I end up getting within 94 yards, and I set up my rifle on one of those bucks, that 4-point, and he stood up and was kind of looking around. And any day of the week, I would have shot that 4-point like without question, like no hesitation. But I was like, oh, I gotta get this other one. This other one was like a 5-point with like kickers and way wide, and like he was a real nice Washington mule deer, easily probably one of my best ones. And so I wait for him, and then the bigger one stands up, and they're separated, so I'm not shooting through another to get to the other type of thing. But he's facing me, so I have like a chest shot, but they're getting antsy, so they're getting ready to bounce. So I'm like, well, if I'm going to shoot, now's the time. I'm 94 yards. I normally, the gun sighted in at 200, it shouldn't be a problem. I shoot, they both like run off, run together, and then split up and go down a canyon. And I'm thinking, what the heck, what happened? And this is a prime example is I hate taking chest shots. Like I completely missed that buck. I went down there, I looked for blood, looked for hair, nothing. Like a complete dry miss. I was like, oh, dude. And I looked all over up and down that canyon for any sort of blood, anything, no, nothing. But the point is I don't like chest shots, and I got greedy. I should have just shot that 4-point at the broadside, and I would have been, plenty happy. But and also, like, I shot prone, and I'm not used to shooting prone. Like most of the time, I'm shooting standing up, or or I'm bracing against a tree or something like that. Most of my shots with deer are well under 100 yards. They're usually like with bear, they're usually 50 yards or less. But I think my cheek was in like the wrong position, and it was, a chest shot is not a very large area to hit. It's pretty small, so you can vary just a little bit one way or the other, and you can cleanly miss that deer. But that was one of my.
It's a lesson that we probably all got to learn eventually, and it's probably best that you didn't injure.
No, yeah, like
so you learned.
I'm always happy with a clean miss. I would much rather have a clean miss than a wounded animal. Yeah,
absolutely.
There was one time I was predator calling for bear. This is in Washington, and I had a stump to my back, and I was calling into some brush with a tree line about 100 yards ahead of me along a logging road. And I was calling away. And sometimes when you're calling, I call it my spidey senses. Like something, you don't necessarily hear it, but you kind of feel it. You're like, something feels like it's coming in. I feel like I'm being watched, something to that effect. And
Yeah.
I had that.
Got
Yeah,
eyes
I
on
was
you.
like,
Yeah.
something's coming. And then all of a sudden, from across the road, all I see is like brown flash and eyes. And I just like swung my 300 in the direction of that thing. And then right before it hit the gun barrel, it stopped. And it was a bobcat that stopped right at the end of my barrel. And it wasn't bobcat season. And plus, the 300 would have blew it in half anyway. But the thing stopped. And I'm like, dude, no one's going to believe me unless I get a photo of this thing. So I reached in my pocket and I break this camera out. And as I'm kind of moving like that, he kind of just backs up just a little bit with his tail flickering. But I was able to get video footage of him sitting at the end of my barrel, and he kind of moves his tail a little bit as he's irritated, and then he just takes off running like 0 to 100 like it's nothing. There's the video of it on my Instagram somewhere. But that was crazy. That was a real close call. Like I wasn't worried about getting seriously hurt other than probably scratched up a little bit, but it was just the surprise and like the
Yeah.
adrenaline rush of how fast that happened and, just complete surprise.
I can't imagine. And you literally, like, you could have touched him with
Yeah.
barrel your
I
rifle.
mean, he was like an inch off of it. I mean, yeah, it wouldn't have been a problem.
When was that? How long ago?
That was before I wrote Ultimate 2. So that was probably 2013, maybe something like that. And then, that's what I like about Predator calling is it's like the Forrest Gump thing. Predator calling is like a box of chocolates.
Yeah.
You never know what you're going to get. You can call out there and you don't know if you're going to get a coyote or a bobcat or dive bomb by hawks or get a bear, cougar. There's all sorts of stuff. The very first time I Predator called, I called in a coyote and a bobcat on the same set. I called in the coyote at 30 minutes and the bobcat at 45. And I had never seen a bobcat before in the wild, and I was like, dude, this is insane. Like, I am hooked. This is what I'm all about now. And so, yeah, so that's.
I bet. I found your video here on your
Oh,
Instagram, and I'm hoping you'll share that with us, man. That's crazy. He's just looking at you, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to just book it. And he just runs
yeah,
down that road. I've never seen anything like
it's
that.
pretty nuts.
I'm amazed that you had your mind on you to actually get your phone.
Well,
I don't know if I would have been like.
it wasn't even my phone. It was like an old like Sony camera, pocket camera. That's how kind of old it was. I think the cell phones back then. I think I probably had like a flip phone or something that I couldn't even get video with. I used to carry that camera around so I could get video and pictures. And so I thought, I had to dig in my pocket, and I was like, dude, no one's gonna believe me if I don't get footage of this. So.
And he sat around for not only to swing your gun around, but to also dig out your camera. That's amazing. Well, that's a really cool
it was.
video.
It was funny to watch because you could tell he was irritated. If you have a house cat, you know how when cats move their tails a certain way, you can tell like they're getting ready to slap you or they're irritated. And he did that with his short little tail. You could just tell he was kind of pissed. He was like, I snuck in for this,
Yeah. It's almost like he's trying to play it cool, and then he looks the other direction finally, and then just is gone. Just absolutely gone.
0 to 100 real quick.
That's awesome. Well, Doug, do you have any more for us? Otherwise, you've given us a lot of close encounters. I think that might be the theme of the
close
episode.
encounters of the bear kind. Patented.
Yeah, right. Anything else? Anything else you want to share? Any ones of your brother being a fool, or any other?
I seem to be talking a lot about misses, so I'll do one more miss. So here we go. So I was deer hunting, not too far from Camp Teabag, and this was a deer hunt. Well, I already said that, but I was watching this little gully, and this big, fat, like beautiful, fluffy coyote come strolling. I was up the gully just like, I don't know, 60 yards, and he was working the bottom of the gully in the burned out area, so it was nice and kind of open. There was brush here or there, but I aim at him, and I'm like, I'm shooting this guy because he's good size. So I shoot, he spins, takes off running, and I was like, I just hit this thing with a 300 win. He's not going anywhere, like he should be down for the count. Well, I go over there, no blood, no nothing. But what I found was I had shot low and like grazed. I went below his belly, but there was like a punch of hair out with no blood or nothing on it, like like you had just shaven the stomach of the coyote. So because
Yeah.
he was so fluffy, I think I misjudged where I should shoot, which is a common misconception with bear too. Lots of times people, they misjudge where they should shoot on a bear because of how long their hair is compared to a deer or an elk. But yeah, that coyote ran off, no blood, no nothing, totally missed. But I gave him something to think about. I definitely shaved his stomach, and that was another thing. And of course, my dad hears the shot and he hops on the radio and says, "Hey, what'd you hit?" And I said, "I missed a coyote." And then, I hear all my brothers and dad laughing at me because I can't hit a coyote, but at 60 yards.
Yeah. Well, that's what hunting buddies are for,
That's
making
right.
fun of you. So that, and hopefully helping with pack outs when you actually do connect.
Yeah, definitely.
Doug, this was fun, man. You have some fun stories. I'm excited to hear how your season goes this year and see if you got any new ones for us. Hopefully the ones from this season are all.
Yeah,
good, so.
I've had a lot more hits than I have misses, but you hunt long enough, you're gonna miss. So that's just what happens.
Yeah, it's inevitable. All right, well, if you don't have any more stories, why don't you tell the people like where they can find you? Maybe your Instagram, maybe a little bit more information about the book and where you get it, or your app.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram, Boze and Bears, Boze and Bears. That's my handle. Facebook, it's just my name, Douglas Boze. The book, Ultimate Guide to Black Bear Hunting, you can find on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. Some Cabela's carry it in stores. It's available in the ebook version if you want. And then, the apps, Ultimate Predator Calls, you can find on Google Play or the App Store for iOS. And that has like 14 sets on it. So what that does is for $5, $4.99, you can push. It's actually recordings of me predator calling, and it's like 14 sounds. And you can push that to a Bluetooth speaker for those who don't want to spend the big money to get into e-calling, or who are a little apprehensive about calling and don't want a bobcat bumping their rifle like I did. You can make your phone and a Bluetooth speaker an easy, cheap electronic caller. And so that's what that app is all about. So yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, awesome, Doug. Thank you so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it. I really do appreciate the stories as well. You got some good content in there, some stuff that makes you laugh, and also some things that scare the shit out of me that I don't want to think about anymore.
Yeah, man, I had fun. Most of the podcasts I've been on are just bear hunting, but it's fun to sit there and actually tell stories. So that's nice. Thank you. Enjoy the change.
Yeah. If you think of any other ones, we're
I'm sure I got a ton.
Yeah. So cool. All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. All right, guys, that's it. Yet another story in the books. If you have any feedback, please let us know. Just go to @huntingstories_official on Instagram and send us a direct message. While you're there, don't forget to follow. So that was a lot of fun. Doug and I went on a few tangents and actually had to edit out some miscellaneous conversations that weren't necessarily hunting stories, but he's a fun guy. In fact, within an hour of finishing the recording, he was actually messaging me thinking that he'd actually thought of other stories that he wanted to tell. So I'm sure we'll be seeing Doug back sometime in the future with plenty more stories, probably getting even closer to bears. Probably start playing tag with them or something. But until then, don't forget to follow him on Instagram and check out his book and his app. You can find actually links to everything in the show notes. But for now, his handle is @Boze and Bears. It's BOZE and Bears. And of course, subscribe, review, and comment on your preferred podcast app, Spotify, Apple, whatever it is, to the Hunting Stories podcast. And of course, don't forget to share it with your friends. Now, as always, finally, we're always looking for more storytellers. So if you, your dad, or your friend, or whomever has a good story, hit us up. We want to hear from all kinds of hunters, as long as you can tell a good story. Thank you again for tuning in. Go make some stories of your own.